What if? You woke up tomorrow and you felt different. What if? You began to question what others haven't noticed. What if? I began to have experiences I could not explain at a very young age. Our worldview is filled with intrigue, wonder, adventure, and of course, mysteries. However, there are some situations that we cannot fully explain, and it's time we open up this dialogue and talk about our experiences. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Welcome to Haunted Mysteries. Welcome to Haunted Mysteries Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. This show will air every other week on the Get Haunted Podcast Network. So sit back and relax, and if you miss it, go to the Get Haunted Podcast Network Facebook page or to my YouTube channel under Haunted Mysteries Podcast. Spend an hour every other week with us, delving into what most of us are chasing after: answers to unexplained happenings. This show brings you a bit of chatter, topics, theories, guest interviews, and more. May you be a believer in cryptids, apparitions, UFOs, consciousness abilities, or anything else. Know that there is another person out there who has experienced something similar or a bit stranger. It's not always in our imagination. This episode is pre-recorded. Good evening, everyone, and thanks again for joining me for yet another episode of Haunted Mysteries Podcast. My name is Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. I am the host and the producer of this show. Well, if you need a blankie or a teddy bear, I would grab one right now. We have an interesting guest with us tonight. Nikki Jacobs is in the house, and she has been through many things, and she has a lot of ability of which she continues to hone and many times can't even shut off. She has been through abduction. She has seen Sasquatch. She has seen the Fae. She has had ongoing communication psychically with apparitions. Yep, she seems to be right on 24/7. And yet there are times when she really wishes she could probably turn this off. We got into a good discussion about UFOs and abduction and the whole 10 yards, so you might want to sit back and just grab a bucket of popcorn on this one. Please welcome my guest to the show tonight, Nikki Jacobs. Well, hello, Nikki, and thank you so very much for being on the show today.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate you offering and asking.
Yeah, well, this is going to be an interesting discussion today because you have I would say, quite a biography when it comes to experiences, being a contactee, being an abductee, the whole 10 yards. So we're going to try to touch on as much as we can today, and if not, we'll just simply have you back. And but I think we need to establish a foundation first, and then we'll just evolve it from there. And I have notes in front of me to ask you a few questions in addition to all of this. So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to go back in time, and because people have their experiences at all different times. And so how old were you, or how young do you remember being when you had any type of an experience that kind of made you sit up and take notice?
I was in a cradle. Very young. Didn't understand that. I understand it now, but hello, being a little kid in a cradle, didn't understand why there were other people walking around my mom and my grandmother, or even my dad, because they looked normal. It wasn't until I was 4 years old and I was on an ET ship. Another incident of really realizing something was truly different was when I was about 10 years old and on a trip, driving trip cross country with my mom and her best friend from Washington State to New York. And saw all sorts of paranormal and touched the Liberty Bell and psychic visions of what it was like, and it was really intense. So, yeah, very early age.
All right, so I'm going to break this down a little bit because I know you've got people intrigued already, and I'm intrigued as well. The very first thing I'm going to ask, though, before I ask about being on the ET ship, is do you have in your family any, like your parents, your grandparents on either side, do they also, or did they have abilities, and did that ever come out to you?
My grandmother did, and the only time it ever came out, first time it ever came out was when I think it was about somewhere between 5 and 6 years old, or 5 and 7. The time frame gets a little fuzzy for me. If I have to go in and look at dates, I will. But for years, but somewhere between 5 and 7 years old, my grandmother was blind. Newly blind, in fact, due to health reasons, and we were on a third floor apartment building right outside of downtown Seattle, like literally a couple of blocks from downtown Seattle, okay? And I'm seeing a man standing in the window, probably about 10, 15 feet from the window, and I'm in my grandmother's kitchen. She asked me to stir something on the stove, so I did. I walked from the kitchen back into the living room. It's one long corridor, so you could see that window. And I'm like, why is there a man standing at the window? We're third floor up.
Right.
Made no sense to my little brain. And I go to the window. I'm standing there, and Grandma says, "Describe him, Nicole." She never called me Nikki. Only person to ever call me Nicole was my grandmother. And I start describing him, and she goes, "You're missing something." And I'm like, "What do you mean I'm missing something?" She goes, "You didn't tell me his baseball hat." What? Excuse me? Is my adult reaction. I just remember standing there, and I turn around and I look at my grandmother, and because he's floating 3 stories up off the sidewalk, basically. And I look at my grandmother, and she goes, "You missed that." And she does this wink with her eye. Now, I've never talked about that. I've never talked about the wink that she did. But yeah, that was when I knew my grandmother, and it had abilities, and it wasn't until of course, moments later, she's like, "Shh, Nicole, we don't talk about those things because that will get us put into the crazy house, into the nut house." Well, this is in the 70s, early 70s. So, early to mid 70s, I should say. And so at that point in time, a number of years later, my grandmother ended up coming to live with my mom and I in our house. And I had a spirit at that time who was singing me to sleep, trying to comfort me because the ETs were taking me. So I couldn't sleep at night. And so that's the other one. So my grandmother would come to live with us, and she would tell us, Joycey, which is my mom, Joycey, there's spooks in the house. There's spooks. So that's how she's like, there's some woman singing, and it sounds like she's sitting in a rocking chair. Well, that's because she was sitting downstairs in a rocking chair, in her favorite rocking chair, rocking away, singing to herself, and just enjoying listening to the kids, because that was what this spirit loved, was little kids, to be around little kids. So, and that's a story in itself. But anyway, so that's how I knew.
That's interesting, because did she ever, your grandmother, right? Did she ever talk about, when you're a kid, and I understand this because I know in the 70s I was really young, and I was more curious about genealogy, and we didn't even talk about anything ghostly, although I did ask my grandmother once if the house that I felt there was something in there, if it was haunted, and of course, being Catholic as she was and stuff. But I found out a couple years ago through a cousin, when I inadvertently just brought up the topic, this is what I do now, and she told me that there was a discussion between my aunt and my grandmother, that they felt that people in the family had abilities, not, they're, going back. Mm-hmm. So did your grandmother ever talk to you at all about, yeah, my mom had it, or my grandma? Nope. How about your mother? Did your mother have it?
No. Matter of fact, she said she always wished she did, and I always said it skipped a generation.
It did.
But I have, the way my mother talked about my grandmother's mother, I often wondered, based on certain things. So my great-grandmother went through a lot of not very good things, let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. But the way my mom talked about her grandmother, ever since I've always wondered, and I can't ask because everybody in my family is now gone. Both my parents, all my great aunts and uncles, because they large family on that side of the family. So there's no one to ask. They're all on the other side, and I can ask them, but it's a bit different than talking face to face. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, even if they were alive, they might deny it, or they might not be in a frame of mind, or they might be what I call logical-minded people that are more skeptical than anything. And so, yeah, it's so the way you describe this, by the way, it is from a trauma perspective, and it may, yes, very definitely probably skipped. Or you got a set of genes that skipped your mother. Yeah. I have abilities that started to activate, when I was 3 years old. And the thing is that there was always you're crazy, you're nuts, don't talk about that, blah, blah, blah. What are you making up? Good imagination. I had the whole 10 yards thrown at me. But the thing is that I also came from a very skeptical type family that wanted to knock everything that, that happened to a person. So you just kind of stayed quiet after a while. So even if you wanted to ask, chances are likely that unless they want to give anything, or maybe they have nothing to give. Trauma, by the way, if for those of you, this is actual research, I believe a lot of my occurrences might have been from trauma of my former relatives, or my great greats or my great great relatives, because it can actually hang on. Literally, it can go back 7 to 14 generations. Now, I don't even have more than 2 or 3. I'm wondering what happened to the other 4 to 8 or whatever generations. So and I know they went through a lot of trauma back then, but it just depends on where they lived and what was happening to them and all that. And then somehow it just seems to, I don't know, it just, you get it and it opens up a path. So when you were in school, I'm curious, when you're in grade school going forward, to 12th grade or whatever, did you know things about the teachers, the students you were with, people around you? Were you picking up on things during that time?
Yes, but I wasn't understanding what I was getting. I just thought everybody had that ability, and so when I said something, somebody else, like a teacher or a helper in the classroom or one of the other parents in the classroom, they're like, what did she just say? And you get that kind of a look, but they don't say anything about it. This is the 1970s. Heck, even in the 1980s, that was not even discussed. And then with my grandmother giving me that, it was very difficult, because you have a grandmother who's telling you, we don't talk about these things. Then you have a situation to where I come from a background of a lot of trauma. Between my parents, and then between my mom and my stepdad. He was awesome to my mom, but because he was in a certain war, he ended up disappearing and became the missing man. But he was doing that to protect the family, so that he didn't come back to the family and end up hurting us. And so he disappeared. And so and then you've got different abuse situations in childhood. You've got different scenarios as a teenager, blah, 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 blah. It's just, that's life. That's just how life is. And I'm very fortunate and very blessed to have the mother that I had. And I'm very thankful for her, because she was very open-minded. And a lot of the other family were very closed-minded. And yet, at the same time, they weren't, because they had open-ended conversations. My great aunts and uncles would have conversations around me when we were camping. We were a family who camped everywhere in Washington, all over Washington. And so you learned. I was very fortunate to have the family that I have. And I go through the grieving times, because, hello, I miss them. Even as a psychic medium, and even if they come in and they're like, hey, how you doing, Nikki? Just coming in to check in on you. And sometimes I get that. Sometimes I'll just get a wave, and that's it. And off they go again. So, but it's different than actually face-to-face, physically face-to-face talking with somebody. But you still go through the grieving process, and you still go through the grieving process of whatever trauma you've been through. It's how you cope and deal. It's how you learn to deal with it. And that's not so easy sometimes. But even as a psychic medium, you got to understand, this is part of the process. This is part of life. So
well,
it's just how it is.
Well, but that's very true. And a lot of us are, I'm going to use the word helpless. When you're in high school, anything from 6th grade, to 12th grade, sometimes you're helpless. Sometimes you just can't if you're in a bad, tormenting situation in your home, you may want to wish you could run away, and there are people that do run away. But the thing is that they have no money, they have no place to go, they have no shelter, they have no food, and the thing is, it can be very, very difficult. So you have to live within this grief and this torment.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, many of us hold that inside. That go with that. You brought up one interesting thing here that I want to touch base back on, just the fact that you live in the Washington area. And so I want to ask you a little bit about your experiences, because most people who know about the hot spots around the U.S. or whatever, or even out of the U.S., they know that one of the questions they always have, and they still have, is let's talk. I'm going to go backwards on this. Let's talk a little bit about Sasquatch, because when I was up in the Washington area, and I hope to get up to the Olympia Peninsula, I think that's what it's called. I heard that it's a pretty big hotbed up there too. But have you had an encounter at all yet with Sasquatch? That's my first question.
That's a very long story. Very long story, but yes, I have.
That's interesting. You would be the first person that would at least talk about the clan aspect that I've talked with. However, I'm not going to say confirm, but I can say that with other individuals that I have talked with, yes, I have come to understand that sometimes they can cloak themselves and be invisible. And that's the main thing that people, when they go out into the forest and the woods, they're always looking for something physical, something in not a human, but in a form, a live form. And they don't always realize that sometimes there's things that are there that they cannot see. And so I have talked with a gentleman who literally was standing right next to one, literally, and someone saw it through their scope or their camera or something that of some sort.
Device,
and they saw the fact that he was literally, there was an outline literally to this, and he goes, I do smell something, and they said, you might want to just kind of casually walk away from that because you're standing right next to one. So I can tell you and everybody that their being invisible can happen. Now, my question to you, though, is because all over the United States, including in Minnesota, there are different species and there are different types. So I guess people would be curious to know, is there a particular type that, I think you mentioned this clan that has been around for God knows how long, obviously. And but anyway, what do you know about that?
Okay, so I know that they are, they're not just across the United States, they're all over the globe. In many different forms. Okay, here's something that the novice should probably learn about, is that not all Sasquatch have abilities. Okay, you get a rogue Sasquatch that may have abilities that has been evicted from their clan for whatever reason. You may get a Sasquatch who is a rogue because of behavior issues that has no capabilities of any kind. Like ability. So certain Sasquatch clans will teach, if they know it, they will teach their children from very, very young the abilities that they have, that they've been blessed with. And that can go across the country. Then you've got the kind of people refer to as, I was going to say dogmen, that's not what I meant. Florida, the skunk ape. That is not technically a Sasquatch. That's a different, so there are different kind of entities, different kind of beings that get recognized sometimes as a Sasquatch because it's a big hairy man. So you get different levels of that. Most are not above ground. Many are below ground because caves, mine shafts, things of that nature are all over this planet, all over the United States. And so, and some of them can open portals. I've had portals opened in my own home.
Yeah.
Sitting next to a fireplace that is not active, but during the winter time, where you've got, say, a house that is, maybe 74, 75 degrees, and all of a sudden, you have a portal that is about 8, 9 feet tall, and you're feeling mountain snow. You're smelling mountain snow. You're feeling the ice coldness, and you're like, and then you're smelling Sasquatch. Now, Sasquatch can smell anything from like pine boughs, which is what I've smelled, all the way to fecal matter.
Yeah.
Because they're not washing.
Yeah.
So, or dog smell, or garbage smell. I mean, it just depends on what they are either around physically or what they want you to believe that they smell like.
Yeah.
So there are so many different levels of this. They can even go down into, depending upon the Sasquatch clan and what they've taught them, they can even go down into orbs about yay big. And that is a mind bender to me. I didn't grasp that concept until end of 2019, beginning of 2020, and it blew my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. They can do what the ETs do. They can go down into an orb. How? Well, it's a specific kind of frequency and energy. So anyway, I'm babbling on a little too long, but anyway, there's the info.
Yeah, no, that's, I'm glad you mentioned that, because in Minnesota, up north, there is reports, of course, of Sasquatch on occasion, but along that accompanies that, people have seen blue orbs, and they usually see them over a marsh-like area where people would not necessarily stand into a marsh because you would sink like quicksand, and you could probably never get out, and you would die. But a Sasquatch has a tendency to somehow, I don't want to say hide in the marsh or be disguised by it, but people for the longest time were wondering if there was an association between these blue orbs and also the Sasquatches that were also being seen at the same time. Now, if the blue orb is technically a Sasquatch and not a UFO or otherworldly presence or energy that's somehow monitoring them or following them or whatever, and it's all one of the same, then that's very interesting that you bring that up. Now, there is a situation I heard about where, and I can't remember, someone told the story, they told it of a lot of times Sasquatches do like to hang out around lakes as well, and especially in wooded areas, and there was a Sasquatch, water source, and there was a Sasquatch on the edge of the lake once, and it felt trapped because there were a bunch of hunters in the area, and it felt trapped, so it started to scream out. And then the guy reported, one of them reported, that he saw out of nowhere this big, huge orb, literally, I don't think it was a craft. I think it was some kind of a huge orb that literally lifted the Sasquatch out of there and brought it to another location, so it felt like it wasn't so trapped, and all that. And I know too that, from what I understand, especially in the Washington area, that for the loggers, if they're taking down trees and they're pushing out, Sasquatches or whatever, and that it pushes them, in another direction, that if the loggers or the truckers see the Sasquatches in any way, they are to keep their mouths shut, because what happens is, if the government learns of this, then they rope off, or somehow they acquire that that area, and then they don't allow anybody in there to do any kind of searching or anything because now it's owned by the government. So there's a lot of things that go along with that. That's very interesting, though. Have you ever physically, literally seen a physical Sasquatch?
Yes. During the time that I was being spoken to when I was up there, when I was told, welcome home. Yeah, I have. On my way home, I during that event, because that's a whole nother story in amongst itself, but short response to that is yes, I have on my way home, because I had that weekend specifically asked the matriarch, may I be allowed to see you? I know what that means for you. I know what that means for your Sasquatch clan. I don't know how. I don't know how you would want to do it. But since you are keeping an extremely close eye on me, because I had asked them to keep my feet on the ground and not be abducted that specific weekend, and they did. They followed through with that promise. On my way home, driving past, I literally saw a Sasquatch. The driver that I was with did not, because we were literally on a mountain curve, and I went, holy, oh my. And the driver was like, are you okay? And I'm like, I just saw, and then I cut it off and I went, something. And I know exactly what I saw, and she was beautiful, and she was in this complete rock quarry area, but it was completely flat. It was up on an incline, and she had to have been about, I want to say 9 feet tall. Based on the distance, and I would love to go back to that spot and map out, tape measure it out and say, okay, so she was this far away from the vehicle on this platform area where all these rocks. I want to figure out how tall she was according to. I don't know how to do that without having, you're dealing with all kinds of scientific stuff that I would love to have that figured out, because it's something that's just, but that takes a great deal of effort. So, because it's on such a dangerous spot in the road.
Yeah, and sometimes, by the way, it's purposeful too. I mean, they may, I don't know how intelligent, obviously they're very intelligent or very observant, but they're not going to put themselves in a position where if there's a chance that someone's going to come back and want to comb that area a little bit more, make it more difficult to be able to do that. And I do know people that have actually collected hair samples from Sasquatch. They've had them analyzed, and their results claimed that the hair sample didn't match anything human or even animal in any what way. It very interesting. So, but
Dr. Melba Ketchum has done studies, so she's one to look into, because she's actually done the genome sequence.
Oh, interesting. What did she ever find out what she found out?
It is the female genome. Don't remember all of it. There's a couple of folks who have interviewed her that I would highly recommend. I'll have to give that information to you off the show. But yeah, Dr. Melba Ketchum, the stuff that she figured out, she took it straight down to the genome and had a hard time finding somebody that would do the science, the proper science, and figure it out. But yeah, look into her. Dr. Melba Ketchum.
Dr. Melba.
So,
I'll write it down here. Yeah. Well, I've heard of especially like you talk about protecting.
Yeah.
I just recall the interview I had. Oh, I must have talked with this person three years ago or whatever, and they can be quite so protecting, quite nasty.
Yeah.
And bite or whatever. Now, when you're looking at these things, do they look like a little human with wings? Is that what they look like?
Sort of. I don't know if you'd... Well, in some ways, yeah. They're humanistic.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not... But they're not around... Okay, how do I say this? So their faces, their body, their hands are very humanistic, but like from around the forehead, down the side of the face, down through the chin area, everything beyond that, different ball game. You could have humanistic ears, you could have pointy ears, you could have human ears, but they're elongated, but they're round and not pointed. You could have no ears. You could have tiny wings, too large wings. Some of the wings that I've seen are iridescent gossamer type wings. Other ones are solid white. I've seen kind of like an iridescent-y blue-green in wings before, but mostly white. I don't know. That leads me into asking questions of the other side. Does that mean that that specific fairy is something specific in their field? You know, so because some of the ETs are like that. So I'm like, oh, this is mind bender.
Yeah. Speaking of ETs, that's where I'm going next. I want to start back. I want to go back to if you have any recollection as a 4-year-old, when you went aboard that craft. Let's start there, okay?
Yeah. Okay. The memory that I have retained all my life, but right around 10 years old, I started shoving it down. Because it was just a memory. And then I started thinking of it as a dream. And it was never a dream. It was always a full-on hardcore memory. Physical reaction, the whole kit and caboodle that goes with it. So 4 years old, I do not know how I was abducted. I don't have memory of that yet. I have not done hypnosis regression. For my own sake, I probably will never do that. I have no problem with hypnosis regression for other people. For me, it's a no-go for other reasons that will come later in my life that I already know about. That said, the memory that I held on to all my life is a memory that fully hit me very hard in 2018, 2019, and it was, I was walking from my kitchen to my, or from my bedroom into my kitchen, had a phone in my hand, in my left hand. My right hand had a tumbler of iced tea, and my phone, I came across a image of what we now know as the Butterfly Nebula. And it was from NASA. It was an image from NASA from their James Webb telescope. And I saw that, and I literally, my knees buckled. And the first words out, and I grabbed onto the counter, and everything dropped. The cup ended up dropping to the counter. The phone almost ended up on the floor. My hands grasped onto the counter, and I'm holding onto the counter for dear life. And the first words out of my mouth were, oh my God, I know that as the Infinity Galaxy. Now, I've since copywritten that. But my and the memory just started flooding back. That whole scene of me standing in front of on board a ship in front of one of their windows. And I'm looking out into space. And I'm remembering what we call the Butterfly Nebula. And off in the far distance is a galaxy, a spiral galaxy. Mm-hmm. There are other nebulas going by, and that, of course, then triggered the earlier memory of me seeing Earth at a distance. Mm-hmm. Big, beautiful blue marble, as we used to call it in the 70s. Mm-hmm. And blue and green marble. And that was when we were leaving Earth. And that's more of, it's a strong memory, but it's also a vague memory because it's so far distant. Mm-hmm. But what I remember the most is the Infinity Galaxy, the Butterfly Nebula, mm-hmm. The Spiral, and some of these other nebula that we were leaving, and we were going back to Earth. Mm-hmm. But what I also remember is I had put my hand up on the window because I was like, wait a minute, I'm not seeing a reflection behind me. Why am I not seeing? It should be glass. I'm, as a little kid, I'm like, mm-hmm. looking at this thing going, that's black. Mm-hmm. Why? I'm looking at this left to right and up and down, and there's literally nothing there but the blackness of space. Mm-hmm. And I remember thinking, why is there no reflection? There's always reflection in glass. Mm-hmm. So I put my hand up, and here's my little 4-year-old fat hand mm-hmm. on this, and I'm pushing at a barrier. And then all of a sudden this bzzz, and this blue light shows up right around my fingers, mm-hmm. all the way around. Mm-hmm. And so you have this expanse of black space. You've got the nebulas in the background, and I'm looking at my hand and hearing this bzzz, mm-hmm. and then I'm being told telepathically, remove your hand. Huh. Why? And I'm verbally asking why, because that's not a window, that's a barrier. And I'm like, well, what's a barrier? Yeah. I'm 4 years old. What the heck is a barrier, And basically it was an energy barrier, and it was and you weren't supposed to ever touch it. But I found out when you do, all the little blue light shows up around your hand. Big no-no.
Interesting. Yeah. But did you ever, now, I'm trying to wrap my head around this. I mean, I know you're 4, and I know that when I was 3, I have very few memories, but I know that there are certain things I do remember, maybe even as early as 2 years old. But did you not wonder what the heck you're doing in this craft, or how you got there, or what this thing was that was kind of talking to you?
I think that had come beforehand, before this situation, mm-hmm. Because I ended up... It's funny because there are aspects of this memory that to this day I'm still terrified to remember. Mm-hmm. In 2019, when I remembered this, 2018, 2019, whichever year it was, mm-hmm. I basically had I had a situation to where anytime I turned around from that platform, from the window, because I was up on a platform that mm-hmm. wasn't actually originally there. That's a whole nother subject about real ET ships mm-hmm. that are metamorphing ships, and they're conscious living metal. That's a whole nother discussion. Wow. But I ended up on that ship with an adult who was about 22 at the time, somewhere between 19 and 22. Mm-hmm. And that person I ended up meeting in 2018. and ended up on a paranormal team with him.
Hmm.
He was in charge of the team.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until the last year or so that I have learned to semi-forgive him, because he turned into somebody that everybody else loved and thought was just hunky-dory, and that's not my situation with them in 2019. So I had a lot of work to do on that. But I realized in the last year and a half, that adult abductees, when they are being required by ETs to handle the children, they're under orders too. And so as the 4-year-old kid, you don't necessarily idolize adults, but they're the adults. And they're the ones that are in charge, and they're human. They don't look like these other people. And that's how you thought of them, as these are other people. These are not beings. These are not monsters. These are other people. And so there's a whole cycle to that. So when I was just fascinated by where we walked and how we were communicating in our minds instead of being verbal. It was essentially insisted upon us that we speak telepathically instead of verbally. So you learn very early on to do that. And like I said earlier, not all I think I said earlier, not all ETs are telepathic. Not all ETs have abilities. So this group that was doing the abduction of us definitely did. And so I was a little kid. Here's an example. I was a little kid, 4 or 5 years old, asking too many questions and running around, and they needed to corral me. So what did they do? They had me sit my rear end down on the ground and have my legs cross-legged with an ET leg right up in between my legs, so that I was, and then wrap my hands not around the ET's leg, on his leg or anything like that, but so that I wasn't up walking around, and that they could continue doing business. And that's how I learned about the quote-unquote splicing, at what I call the splicing and dicing, and learned some of the information about the genetic stuff. And some of that I don't have the memories of exactly how they do it, but I was going to say standing, but I was sitting on my butt watching him do it, and he's talking about telling me exactly what he's doing.
Interesting.
It's fascinating. I mean, the whole thing. So
have they contacted you? So this happened when you were young. So
that was 4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
So throughout your years now, going forward, how often did they, I'm going to say, re-abduct you or revisit you, or have you ever seen them show up in your bedroom? Or any place like that? What was that like?
I have no memories. On one hand, I want to say I have no memories from, and it's not true, but that's how I feel. Because on one hand, I basically lived my life. And I have since learned how they manipulate the mind, the human, how specific races of ET can manipulate the human mind in such a specific way to where they can put us into where we are thinking we are in a dream state, when in fact we are not. We are fully conscious and awake. But they they maneuver the brain in such a specific way that it appears to our consciousness that we're actually in a dream, and we're not. That is very, very frustrating to me. But that's one of the things that I wanted to say about that, because that is how many abductions occur. I also call us mindless little automatons, because there have been times when I have woken up, and this is kind of getting around the long way to answer your question, but there have been times when I have woken up, I've gone to bed in my PJs and have woken up, for example, in 2021, I think it was, on vacation, I woke up in a forest. And what woke me up was the fact of the crunching of the twigs and branches under our feet. And I was with a group of other humans, and we were surrounded between 7 and 9. 7. Yeah, 7 of us, or 7 ET, 7 tall, what I call tall gray whites. 7 foot tall gray whites. And basically they're so pasty gray that from a distance they look like they're white. And we're completely surrounded, and I'm screaming in my head to tell everybody to wake up because they can all hear me. We're all telepathic, and then I get told to be quiet, and it's okay, Nikki, and then I get told to be quiet, and that's the last thing I see light starting to come down, and that's the last thing I remember, man. And I'm like, son of a diddly. So, I was not a happy camper over that. I was really rather PO'd. And that's when I call us mindless little automatons, because they have us, they control the brain to where they can tell us exactly what we're to do. So in other words, get dressed, get your shoes and socks on, get your bra on. I was fully clothed. Bra, underwear, socks, shoes, coat, winter coat. I'm like, and I went to look at my shoes when I got back, and I'm like, yep, there's branches, there's mud. There should not have been anything on those shoes. When I went to bed, I had been walking on gravel. I had been walking on, I can't think of what it's called. It's little pieces of wood, bark. Thank you.
Yeah.
And so there should not have been like
any debris at all underneath your shoes.
Nothing. And what I was literally seeing was little green pieces, like from evergreen fir, like fir tree.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there should not have been a single thing in the treads of my shoes. There should not have been mud on my shoes. Nothing.
Well, as we, and one more question about that, and then we'll go into a wrap up, and we'll have to have you back, because there's a lot more to her life story that meets the eye, and we're just really getting started here. So people are probably going to wonder, what exactly did they want of you? Why are they still your genetics? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah, they're, okay, so here's something that I have since learned, because I've gone through all the different stages of emotions with this. Everything from incredible anger and rage to absolute crying and tears and why me, and oh my God, I can't believe this is happening, and this is really real. So I have since found out that I've got a soul contract, that I've had a soul contract for specifically my genetics. Okay. So I'm the surrogate mother to over 30 hybrid children.
Good Lord.
Still a mind bender for me to even think about, let alone say. I have a real hard time even believing that, but I know it. I've seen it. I've seen I don't remember every single one of my kids, but I do remember certain ones. And certain ones are in contact with me, which is, I have been, in the last 2 years, I've been told how really rare that is. Did not know, I no idea. And so for me, it's genetics. Because I've always said that I've been abducted by 3 different groups of ET. I now understand why I say that. The first group did not stick with me. I do not have any idea why, which is totally fine by me. They can go away. They were very scary looking. The others is genetic, and the third round deals with a whole different gambit, which we could get into much later on down. And that gets into some very nasty stuff. So, to say the least. But the ones that from 4 years old, or actually I have been consistently told by other psychics, both friends and strangers, that I have been abducted while my mother was pregnant with me. Okay. So this, and I have been told that my grandmother was, that my mom was, that I was. I believe my dad was, and I do believe there are other family members that are still living that were. That's not going to go over well. But, so... But for me, it's genetics.
They're following a line, and the genetics to help, from what I understand, keep their own populations from going into a demise. So we will have to have you back.
Well, it's not just it's not just 1 or 2 or even 3 races of ET that are trying to do that. There's a number of them, and I did not know that until 2020. So it gets pretty incredible. Well, and of course, a lot of us, many that are listening to this show right now, are probably wondering and scratching their heads on things. And tell everybody in the meantime, though, how they can get a hold of you, if they want to talk with you, if they want to, or what kinds of questions you would welcome. Give people an idea of how they can get a hold of you. I can be reached via email. Restore Belief 2022 at gmail.com. I am also available on Facebook, and it's facebook.com/ and then Nikki, Nikki, dot Jacobs, Jacobs, .376. That's my main page. I am very specific. I do not have a lot of people on my Facebook page, but a lot of people follow me, which is totally fine to do. And I've got a psychic medium page that I post publicly a lot of things. So those are, the YouTube page is Restore Belief with Nikki. I believe it's at Restore Belief with Nikki, and then some numbers. I think it's like 6962 or something like that. Restore Belief with Nikki is my YouTube channel.
I've got the numbers here. And I will be putting all of this information on your show notes, so people can, of course, re-look back at this, or they'll see them on the show notes.
Awesome.
Need to get a hold of you, but we will have you back. There's a lot more we need to talk about, but we're going to cut this short now, because obviously I'm going to have to clip a little bit. But outside of that, I just want to thank you so very much for your time today, and we'll have you back. So thank you for being on the show today, Nikki.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching and listening to Haunted Mysteries Podcast. The content, music, and creative sound effects, as heard on the Haunted Mysteries Podcast, are copyrighted and licensed commercially to Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz. Please do not reproduce in any manner without the express permission of Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz, Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Haunted Mysteries Podcast, and or any affiliated networks such as the Get Haunted Podcast Network. The opinions and information expressed by the guest, hosts, and sources as heard and seen on the Haunted Mysteries Podcast are not necessarily those of Diamond Point Entertainment, LLC, Paranormal Universal Press, LLC, Haunted Mysteries Podcast, and the Get Haunted Podcast Network, as well as its producers. Although the content of the shows may be interesting, the information and opinions within are deemed for entertainment purposes only. Subscribe to continue your enjoyment and interest, and thank you for making Haunted Mysteries Podcast part of your day.